This panel is organized in partnership with the Embassy of the Netherlands. Dear participants, welcome to the 10th Belgrade Security Forum. Our next panel is starting now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Valerie Hopkins, the Southeast Europe correspondent for the Financial Times, and I'm thrilled to be here in the comfort of my own living room to be able to discuss with such an esteemed panel of the Western Balkans emerging from the new disorder. Indeed, since this time last year when many of us were assembled in person in Belgrade, the same day that French President Emmanuel Macron blocked the opening accession of talks for Albania and North Macedonia, a tremendous deal has happened. In Serbia, the majority of the opposition boycotted the elections, allowing for a landslide win for the ruling party, which is now composing the government as we speak. Kosovo went through a political crisis culminating in the overthrow of a young first-time government during an unprecedented pandemic. In Montenegro, Milo Djukanovic's DPS, in power for 3 decades, suffered its first electoral defeat. And in North Macedonia, Premier Zoran Zaev just managed to hold on, announcing an ambitious plan to close accession negotiations with the EU in 6 years. I'm looking forward to hearing what the Commissioner has to say about that. Both Bosnia and Herzegovina and Albania are due for elections, but no major change is expected. On top of all that, we have a climate of democratic backsliding and struggling media freedom. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. Public outcry was particularly loud in Serbia as the government introduced very strong lockdowns and curfews, halting the economic activity and breaching constitutional rights. The crisis is far from over, and the prospects for the future, the government bailout programs, etc., are far from clear. And let's not forget that right before the pandemic, we had 2 devastating earthquakes in 2 of the capitals in the region, Tirana and Zagreb, attracting quite a lot of attention and financial and material aid from neighbors. So now that I've set the context, I want to introduce the speakers. We have quite a distinguished panel. European Commissioner for Enlargement, Oliver Varhelyi, Jona Podkivanak. We have the Czech Foreign Minister, Tomás Petriček. Robert de Groot, the permanent representative of the Netherlands to the European Union from his base in Brussels. We have Ambassador Susanne SCHÜTZ, who is the Director for Southeast Europe, Turkey and EFTA states at the German Foreign Ministry. And we have Majlinda Bregu, the Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council. We only have 1 hour, and I want to make sure that some members of the audience can ask questions, so let's get right down to it. I will give the floor to Commissioner Varhelyi. And I want to ask him that, sometimes when my friends are being contrarian in the very excellent, funny Black Balkan humor that we sometimes hear, they describe these kinds of discussions as an exercise in which Brussels pretends it's still interested in the accession of Western Balkan countries, and Balkan leaders and citizens pretend to believe it. So you recently launched, with much fanfare, a €9 billion investment package and a new enlargement strategy. Do you think that's enough to persuade my skeptical friends that you really are interested? And what kind of timeline do you see? Is Premier Zaev a little bit too ambitious when he talks about 6 years? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must admit that the sound quality is not the best, so I'm not sure whether I managed to get the questions right, but I will try to respond to them at the end of my little speech. So, dear colleagues and dear guests, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to take part of this forum, which is for the past 10 years has provided a very useful context for discussions with the public, with the diplomats, everybody interested in these issues. The Western Balkans has been a priority for this Commission since the very first day of our mandate. The stability, security, and prosperity of the Western Balkans is closely linked to the EU. Therefore, we have worked on a renewed partnership with the region from the very first day in the office. We have developed a 3-track approach, as you might know, to reinvigorate the enlargement process and to rebuild trust in the region towards the EU. First, we have adopted a new enlargement methodology based on the principles of increased credibility, predictability, dynamism, and political steer. Second, on the basis of the new methodology, we propose to open accession negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia, something that was endorsed also by the European Council already in March. And third and lastly, on the 6th of October, we have adopted a major economic and investment plan for the whole region, together with the annual reports on enlargement. The pandemic did not deter us from keeping the Western Balkans as key priority for the European Union, and also keeping them very close in our efforts to fight the pandemic, be it the health crisis or be it the economic crisis. The future of the whole region lies in the European Union, and it is in our strategic interest to bring them closer to the EU and into the EU, as it is in their interest to deliver on the reforms necessary to join us. We have been providing during the pandemic unprecedented support to the region, first with the emergency medical assistance, then together with the economic recovery support, and especially by maintaining the financial flows and liquidity for the SMEs and to be able to contribute to keep the economies running. Our focus is now supporting the longer-term socio-economic recovery and promoting economic development and governance with the EU. Convergence, sorry. The economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans aims at providing up to 9 billion euros in grants to promote long-term economic recovery of the region, to be complemented by the new Western Balkans Guarantee Facility, which is supposed to raise investments of up to 20 billion euros. This is a package reaching almost 1/3 of the GDP of the region. Not only that, but we do hope that, according to our modest estimates, it should boost the economy of the Western Balkans by at least 3.6%. During my trip, I heard already other calculations by the different countries of the region, everybody with higher figures. So it should have a major impact. This support promotes sustained economic growth. It will support the implementation of reforms required to move forward on the EU path and bring the Western Balkans closer to the EU single market. The plan should bring about growth and jobs in the region and should help transforming itself into one of the most attractive investment hubs. It aims to change the region in the coming 4 or 5 years on the ground. The plan will support green and digital transition, foster regional integration and convergence with the European Union. The investment package at the heart of this plan is structured around key areas of crucial importance, such as transport and infrastructure, clean energy, environment, digital future, and private sector and human capital, with a very strong focus on youth. With the economic and investment plan, we aim to bring the region closer to the EU and foster regional cooperation as well. During the outbreak of the pandemic, the region showed that it can work together. With the successful establishment of the green lanes, we saw inclusive regional cooperation at its best. This success should inspire the future of the regional economic integration. For the past 7 months, Western Balkan governments have been engaged in developing a new vision for the regional economic area. I look forward to the leaders of the Western Balkans agreeing an ambitious action plan to develop a common regional market at the Sofia summit coming in the next couple of weeks on the 10th of November. This is critical to increase the attractiveness and competitiveness of the region and to reap the benefits of at least 7% of GDP growth only through this initiative. Boosting economic growth in the Western Balkans only be possible if governments firmly commit to and implement fundamental reforms based on European values. structural economic reforms, strengthening the rule and democratic principles, tackling corruption, improving public administrations, reforms which are essential to ensuring long-term security and stability in the region. The 2020 enlargement package, which we adopted together with the plan, provides a detailed overview of the state of play of fundamental reforms and provides very detailed guidance on these reform priorities for the governments of the region. Security in the Western Balkans is the EU's security. The European Union is unconditionally committed to working with this region on its path to membership and address the evolving security threats together. I do thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Varhelyi. I want to turn now to Foreign Minister Petriček and ask, how do you see your government supporting the countries of the region in their accession ambitions?
Dear Commissioner Varhelyi, dear Secretary General, dear colleagues, dear all, I would like to also join and thank you for inviting me to take part in the celebratory 10th edition of the Belgrade Security Forum. I would like to be very brief because Commissioner Varhelyi has covered many of the aspects, so I would like to start from the perspective of a member state. First, I would like to underline that Czechia is a great friend of the countries of the Western Balkans, and we are keen supporters of the European perspective of this region. Notwithstanding all difficulties or current difficulties, we must not slow down the integration process of the Western Balkan countries with the European Union, and on the contrary, we must deepen cooperation in many fields. And here I would like to thank Commission for initiatives endorsed during the October. I see this as not only the key to ensuring long-term prosperity and stability in the Balkans, but also an opportunity to quickly heal local economies hit by pandemics and to calm the often turbulent political waters. As Commissioner Varhelyi mentioned earlier this year, the European Union reconfirmed its commitment to the prospect of EU membership. Here, member states played a crucial role to support the move to give the green light to the start of accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, and also the support for holding a virtual EU Western Balkan Summit. And here I would like to also express our gratitude to Croat presidency, who did it under complicated circumstances. I believe that we need to now use the momentum created by these important milestones. We need to maintain it, and here the Czech government will continue supporting all the candidate and potential candidate countries in their endeavor to join the European Union. Let me also look at the overall stability of the region, because I think this is one of the issues we are discussing very frequently. And here I have to point out the importance of the process of normalizations of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. I therefore welcome the fact that the Serbia-Kosovo dialogue has been restarted. Surely this particular process is a very complex issue, but it shows us how the region and individual countries cannot move forward without coming to terms with the past, reconciling and establishing good neighborly relations. I do understand the sensitivities involved in all the difficult regional relationships, but they need to be overcome for the benefit of the generations coming after us. And in order to show this is possible, if there is enough political will on the part of state leaders, I often mention the example of the Czechs and Germans, who also had complicated past, but who have been able to overcome the past and move forward through joint determined effort, which hasn't been stopped by simple memorandum or declaration, but it is continuous activity on both sides. Let me also stress that currently I see that we need to also tackle the pandemic, and maybe we can discuss it in more detail during the debate. But here I see some of the options and some of the challenges. On the one hand, the pandemic has increased the role of state, and I think it is understandable at a time of such a complicated situation. On the other hand, however, I am convinced that weakening of the rule of law, media freedom, and of transparent participation of citizens in the exercise of power shouldn't be, shall not be long-lasting, and I fully convinced that, that to say I hope we are not creating the new normality, or it may be tempting, but at the end of the day, it is a losing strategy. And as I said, it might be tempting, but my message is therefore simple: do not weaken democratic institutions, and do not give up necessary reforms. Here, credible action needs to be taken in the field of rule of law, transparency, judiciary, fight against corruption and organized crime, and reforms of public administration. Let me close by reiterating that the Czech Republic sees the countries of the Western Balkans as an integral part of a large European family. This is why my country will always actively contribute to peace, stability, and prosperity based on democratic values, good regional cooperation, and good relationship between countries of this region. And we are always ready to share our own experiences from our accession process. I firmly believe that we will successfully overcome all the challenges, not only in terms of current pandemic, but all the challenges that we are facing together, but we can face them only through joint efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foreign Minister. Before I hand the floor to Mr. de Groot, I want to remind people that you can, if you already have a burning question, submit it via the BSF online platform or on the YouTube page. I'll be collecting those questions, and hopefully we'll be able to ask some of the panelists. But now I want to ask Mr. de Groot maybe to inject a little bit of a controversy here. Of course, your government is a big supporter of this region, including, for instance, this panel. At the same time, The Hague takes a pretty hard line on enlargement. I'm wondering, how does your government see some of the developments in the region in the past year or so, especially in the wake of the crisis? And do you have a different take on the credible perspective for the countries of this region in the near future? Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, and dear Minister, dear Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome also to this forum. I'm sorry not to be able to be in Belgrade. In fact, I was never there before the 1990s, not even when I dated a Serbian girl when I was at university. But I have been in the Western Balkans a lot since the mid-90s. And what people have gone through here is something none of us can ignore. So the Western Balkans is in fact an important part of the 30 years of diplomatic experience I have under my belt. And I wish I was with you today in sunny Belgrade and not in grey Brussels. Now to the questions you've asked, Valerie. We promised integration into the Euro-Atlantic structures. This promise stands, and we will stick to it. With the benefit of hindsight, I can now see we did not make clear enough what integration implies. For us, integration means membership of our family of values, of the rule of law, governance, laws and regulations, and only when governance and the rule of law are truly rooted, a country can prosper and thrive within the European Union. And let us remember why the European Union was set up in 1958. So this is not an easy challenge, it's a continuing challenge. So of eminent importance, we get the fundamentals right before membership. You need the fundamentals to be right before the economic benefits can be reaped, as has already been said by Commissioner Varhelyi. Member States and also the Commission are standing by the Western Balkans with not only statements, not only Council conclusions, but also with help through funds and people. And I agree with the Commissioner that it's not always clear in the Western Balkans that the EU and the Member States are the biggest investor, the biggest trading partner, and the biggest donor. We should do better, in fact, on our communications. The Netherlands often comes across as, exactly as you put it, Valerie, as very strict. And you're right, we are. We are strict towards other members of the Union on what they should be doing with all the EU regulations, and we are strict, fair, and engaged towards candidate members. We look closely at the conditions and indeed want them to be fully met. And when they are met, we deliver as well. And we remain engaged and will stay engaged. We assist where possible and when necessary, including during the horrible COVID pandemic that hit so many countries in the Western Balkans, as well as during earthquakes and, let's not forget, the migration crisis. But once again, we will not fiddle around with conditions. Everything is transparent these days. All is on the internet. And like politicians in the Western Balkans, also my politicians back home have to show voters that things are done as promised. The revised methodology for EU enlargement put forward allows us to speed up and deepen the reforms. And this is not a means to postpone or even put off. This is a sincere way of making things happen faster. On the opening of accession negotiations with Albania, first off, we are happy the decision to open accession negotiations was taken in March. We were indeed one of the member states that could not yet agree to this earlier. The conditions set were clear, and my country could only agree to a next step in this difficult progress once they were fully met. Cutting corners at this stage of a long process will not do anyone any good. Kicking the can down the road doesn't make the can go away. Back to Serbia. Like many, parts of the opposition boycotting the parliamentary election has left the electorate without a full variety of choice, and you see this reflected in the makeup of the new parliament. That being said, there's now a supermajority in parliament for the ruling political party, and this presents them with an opportunity to prove they are serious about EU membership and the rule of law reform. There is not a single parliamentary hurdle left to hide behind. So we expect to see rapid reform, especially in the areas that are crucial in negotiations and are close to the heart of our democracy as well. Human rights, for example, anti-corruption and media freedom. All these goals require legal reform and adequate operating space for respective agencies. That is the opportunity the government is presented with. That is what they can and should deliver on. This will bring Serbia, with all its economic potential, closer to our joint end goal of full EU membership. Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you so much. I want to come back now to a regional perspective from the region, and that is with Ms. Majlinda Bregu, who is the Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council. And, you know, we've had several conversations at this point since the pandemic began about the new opportunities for regional cooperation in the pandemic. I wonder, what kind of challenges, but also opportunities have you seen emerging from the pandemic in terms of regional cooperation?
Hello to everybody, and I hope I got you right, Valerie, because I do hear some echo from your side. But I guess since we have been discussing and talking on this COVID when the pandemic hit the region, and these dark prospects that now I see are kind of in a process of being reported and analyzed in everywhere global-wide. So the region will still have those neuralgic problems that were present in there even before the pandemic hit. And I speak on terms of unemployment, of problems with the economic growth. So all these global backlashes around our economies definitely will be felt in the region, and the tyranny of the present is quite overwhelming. But on the other side, so from the commissioner and all the distinguished speakers, you were mentioning all together the necessity to stay together and firm in this process of trying to help the Western Balkans to come out and recover from this pandemic. Definitely at the beginning, I would say that irrespective of the problems that the region always faces, the rapid response was given by all the economies, and it created kind of a breathing space that was quite needed from the citizens to maintain and to control the damage. The very first round of support of 3.3 billion euros offered by EU side as well was highly welcomed. And you know that humans are the same everywhere. So the uncertainty, frustration, anxiety at the very first days were so high that everybody was kind of puzzled what was going to happen. So all the countries were mostly focused on their own problems and their own policies. But I would say that from that, again, and then reinforced with the new economic and investment package that was launched and mentioned quite thoroughly, so extensively by the commissioner. Now the Western Balkans, with this plan of not only, it's not important only in terms of figures of 9 billion euros and then the possibility to have 20 billion more in soft loans, but it's important because it's keeping Western Balkans next door in the same process of recovery that all the European countries have to pass through. So I think that now what is identified from the region is that the need for policies, for institutions as well, and for the right programs and agendas to support the resilience has never been greater. When we met first at the beginning of this pandemic, you knew that we were working on trying to build up the new phase of keeping the region together and keeping the efforts, the coordinated efforts running positively. So now this is maybe the very first panel that I will share, but not in high tones, but I have to be, and I have more reasons today to be more hopeful that by Sofia Summit on 10th of November, we will have a very good roadmap action plan on the common regional market. The common regional market, that's the new title that the former REA, Regional Economic Area, will have, but you have heard or read it in the economic and investment plan as well. I think it will seal this time not only the self-consciousness on the necessity of regional cooperation that is felt everywhere in the region, but as well the necessity for a stronger and deeper economic integration, intra-trade, and then aligning this market, common regional market, Western Balkans 6 common regional market with EU single market. So just briefly, last days we finally we are still working on the text, so it's in the final phase of being cleared, polished, and edited, so proofread it. But what will this common regional market bring in that we are looking forward to be endorsed from the leaders in the Sofia summit? It will follow more closely the four freedoms approach, the principles that governs the EU internal market, and that you heard last year mentioned as part of the mini Schengen proposal. So the new common regional market will have the four freedoms in, will constitute on the basis and the good stories, the successes of the first area, and it will be enhanced and continue further with the digital, the investment, the European value chains, and innovation constitute as the building blocks of this document. So to this end, looking forward for this action plan to be endorsed, the region will aim to build a common market based on EU rules, and that I think it's quite important. The regional market will be a stepping stone for Western Balkans to recover on the post-pandemic phase. It will be a stepping stone for Western Balkans business community, for firms to better integrate with European value chains, to strengthen their competitiveness in the European and global marketplace. And some estimates show that the regional economic integration can generate up to 2.5% of GDP should the level of integration reach the level of EFTA. And in case of reaching the level that the EU member states have among them, we might have a 6.7% growth in GDP. Okay, I know that always the documents look better than realities, but what I really feel this time, and I have to say it, is that the situation and the landscape on the regional cooperation has changed. The content has changed. You might remember quite well that at the early beginning of the 90s, the process was mostly externally driven initiative, the regional cooperation in Southeast Europe, and was dominated by the security concerns of the 90s. Now it has been locally appropriated. Citizens support it overwhelmingly. Governments of the region, they do feel and they do understand that the emphasis of the on the regional cooperation, good neighborly relations, it will not only strengthen the relations among Western Balkan 6, but it will definitely help our economies and the whole region to keep the right perspective on. So the EU accession process as well is help. So it's one hand helping the other. So I do feel that from the citizens to the politicians, all the players, so civil society, media as well, have quite a clear understanding that in times, especially in times of crisis, what we need is to fight the unemployment. We need people to have access and to have job opportunities that can be found everywhere. And you know that on that there is one good, well-oriented pillar on the mobility. You know that one of the ideas, maybe we mentioned it last year, but I have to re-mention it, that it's part of this common regional market. It's going to be the facilitation of movement of Western Balkans people with ID cards. This will definitely help first the Kosovars and Bosniaks who are not yet allowed to travel in each country without a visa requirement. But definitely through a regional agreement of common regional market, even the bilateral, I wouldn't like to mention disputes, but the problems that are still existing can have a better way how to be sorted. So if all six will agree on moving together, the mutual recognition of professions, it means that it's going to be quite easy, and for one Kosovar it will be the same to find a job in Sarajevo or in Belgrade as it will be for one Albanian. So that's how we see the process evolving in the region.
Thank you so much. I hope we can come back to some of these topics. I want to give the floor to our final speaker, Ambassador Susanne SCHÜTZ. The German presidency of the EU began with a lot of ambition despite the difficulties brought by the pandemic, and there's been quite a lot going on. I'm wondering now, what do you see as realistic in terms of the goals on progress for accession for North Macedonia and Albania by the end of your country's presidency? I mean, will we see some concrete new steps towards engagement? And thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. And let me first also mention that the Western Balkans is a very high priority for Germany and goes far beyond the current EU presidency. As is known, we've always considered that the European Union will not be complete if not with the membership of all 6 Western Balkan countries. And for many years, Germany has been one of the most important partners and also donor, together, of course, with the EU and other bilateral donors. And so we really want this region to develop in a prosperous and stable region, not only for the countries themselves, but also because we see that we as EU, as Germany, we profit from stable developments in the Western Balkans, who indeed are part of the European territory already today. They form sort of the inner courtyard, and even geographically speaking, enlargement is not the right term. The EU presidency now gives us the possibility to, first of all, build on what was achieved in the Croatian presidency, and we welcome very much that in March the Council decided on to give a green light for both North Macedonia and Albania to start accession talks, and of course also to the commitment to the EU presidency, which was reaffirmed during the Zagreb summit. So now for us, there are several challenges ahead, and you mentioned the accession talks with North Macedonia and Albania, and they are indeed our main concern for the moment, because we do want to finalize the negotiation frameworks with both by the 10th of November. And we hope that it will also be possible to have first intergovernmental conferences by the end of this year. There are still some hurdles to be overcome. There is the difficult bilateral relationship between North Macedonia and Bulgaria, but we are confident that the problems can be solved in a way that they will not stand in the way to finalize the negotiation framework and to have a first intergovernmental conference with North Macedonia still this year. As for Albania, the situation is a little bit more difficult, and it was mentioned that there were certain conditions attached to the green light given to Albania in March, and of course we hope, and we're still working also with Albania to hopefully make sure that the conditions can be met still while under our EU presidency. One other issue, and it was already mentioned as well, is the normalization dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. We're very happy that in April the EU decided to nominate Miroslav Lajčák as the special envoy for the normalization dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. And we support Miroslav Lajčák because we believe that he has an enormous engagement in the region, and there are still a lot of difficulties to be overcome. We see this on a daily basis. However, I believe that also people in Serbia understand very well that the independence of Kosovo today is a reality and that there is no way back. And we are confident that there is no alternative for Serbia and Kosovo to solving their differences in a comprehensive agreement which is sustainable, allows for the realization of the EU perspective of both countries, and contributes to the stability of the entire region. And looking towards both countries' aspirations to become members of the European Union, I would find it difficult to imagine that there could be members in the EU which do not fully recognize each other. Now, final word, Berlin process, and I commend Majlinda Bregu and of course also the Commission for their positive work to have finalized the common regional market. I still have to get used to the term. We're very happy that this will be able, that this has been finalized, and that for the Sofia summit, this will be the major deliverable of this year's Berlin. We still believe that the Berlin process has a very important role to play alongside with the EU accession process, because they're the countries themselves, the ownership is with the region in order to intensify the regional cooperation of the six together. And in that respect, I would like to also remind of the very important role of the civil society, which within the Berlin process has found a particular important role in RICO, the Regional Youth Cooperation Office, and I'm very happy that they exist working, and also Germany and France together have sort of been the foster parents for this organization, drawing on the German-French experience and recovery. But I would also like to mention the important German-Czech work in order to reconcile differences, like historical differences, after the Second World War. And I think this is an important message to the entire region. There's still ethnic divisions and sometimes even hate speech. And so we would really hope that the process of reconciliation, all our support, with the support of the Commission and Germany as well, will continue to create a region which will adhere to European standards and values, and of course become members of our community. So thank you, Valerie.
Thank you so much, Ambassador SCHÜTZ, and it's great to see you. I mean, you were one of the last people I saw on a panel in Skopje before our whole world changed suddenly. So it's great to see you again, and it's very inspiring to hear such a clear and unequivocal support for not only the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, but for a legally binding solution based on mutual recognition. I would like to come back to Commissioner Varhelyi, and I will actually, we are already 20 minutes out, so I will actually take my first audience question for you, which comes from Mirjana Bjelica, and she wants to know, Mr. Commissioner, apart from the plain reallocation of regular unchanged IPA 3 multi-annual allocations, she says, she doesn't see any she cannot trace any additional allocations that would justify the pomp with which the new economic investment plan was announced. She wants to know, is she reading Commission communication papers wrong, or is this just a reallocation of previous country allocations into one pot that will then be reallocated for projects that are in the final stages of preparations? And if so, do you expect to see problems if more funds end up being spent in Montenegro or Albania proportionally as opposed to North Macedonia, say? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have one budget, so it would be very difficult to have other funds than what we are allocated to by the member states and the European Parliament. So our source of financing is, of course, going to be the IPA 3. But the big invention of all this is that while we had to suffer significant cuts in the funding in the external action side, we not only maintained proportionately the level of our spending, but proportionately even raised the funding if you compare it with the previous period. Second, these funds are now geared towards even more leveraging. And this is how this package will become much more significant than what we have been doing so far in the region. So one would have to look at the bigger picture, not so much the technicalities. And when we look at the flagship projects, what you see is a completely different regional approach. it's no longer about who gets how much. It's about raising the region economically and sociologically at the same time and at the same speed. So we decided to help to link all the capitals with highways and railways. We suggest to invest into creating and linking up all the capitals with high-speed broadband internet connections. We suggest to phase out coal completely from the energy mix of these countries, and also doing away with the single biggest health hazard of Europe, which is the smog created by coal used for energy. This will change the landscape completely in the region in the next coming 4 or 5 years. All these that we have put as flagship projects are to be implemented within the next 4 or 5 years. It means that people can get from one capital to another easily. This is why the regional economic area is so important, that trucks and goods can get to one capital to another and to Europe much easier, that services can be rendered within the region much easier, and capital can flow within the region much easier. So if this is not new, then I don't know what is.
Thank you very much for a very strong answer. I agree that I do think in all of my travels around the region, the smog and the pollution is among the things that frustrate citizens the most. And I think it will be incredible if real tangible improvements to the air quality will be revealed. I want to pivot a bit now and ask Minister Petriček how you see the influence of external actors in the Balkans. Your country has made a lot of news for its relationship with China. And in the Western Balkans, we see quite a lot of global powers vying for influence. And I wonder if you would be willing to comment on that.
I have to start from highlighting the strategic outlook we are advocating that needs to be taken by the European Union. Because if EU is not a credible partner in the Balkans, if member states are not a credible partner for the Western Balkans countries, then obviously we are creating a political vacuum and economic vacuum in which other external actors can easily get. Here we are certainly concerned about growing activity and growing influence of some of the actors through both economic and political channels. At the same time, I think if I may highlight one issue, it is also a little bit less under the radar, is also the question of how the religion is still playing a role, and how, for example, a church can be a tool for external actors to influence the situation in the Western Balkan societies. Here, we need to start with us to fulfill also our obligations when it comes to the partnership with and cooperation with the Western Balkan countries. I hope that this year we made a reparate, or we made a correction of what probably we missed in the years before. With Northern Macedonia and Albania, with the economic plan, and also I believe it's very, very visible and tangible assistance during the pandemic, when the European Union and many member states were of substantial assistance to countries to deal with the crisis. Based on that, we need to also start discussion more the alignment when it comes to, for example, foreign policy of the countries in the region with the foreign policy of the European Union. because this is a part of the story. One of the obligations of future member states is also to align their foreign policies with the EU foreign policy positions. And we need more of the discussion with the Western Balkan countries on this, I believe. I don't see the situation to be any way dramatic. We see that external actors are increasingly active in the region. At the same time, I believe that the EU is now in a good position and should use the momentum from March and October to reopen some of the discussions we need with the governments of the region.
Thank you so much. And maybe I can ask both you and also Mr. de Groot for your opinions briefly. It's a pity that the commissioner had to leave, because I would have been very curious about his position on this. His predecessor, Commissioner Hahn, was quite often campaigning to introduce qualified majority voting when enlargement was concerned. Obviously not for the final votes on enlargement, but for the opening of individual chapters, etc. And I would ask both of you, maybe Minister Petriček and also Mr. de Groot, when he finishes, would you support such an initiative to introduce that kind of voting procedure?
I'm a realist, and I know that it is not currently on the table. We are certainly in a situation when we need to discuss how to make our foreign policy and policy towards the EU neighborhood more effective and more predictable. Here, it is a question of discussing a qualified majority voting, but this is only one part of the story. For me, more important is that we need a strategic convergence among the member states on key issues. We need to understand the problems in the world the same way in the European Union in order to be able to actively and effectively project stability and prosperity in our neighborhood. I think it is a more sustainable and more effective solution than introducing qualified majority voting, because then we will have some member states who might not be always on the board and who might otherwise not comply with the decisions. And in the case of foreign policy, it is even more important to have a strong, united voice of the EU.
Thank you so much. Mr. de Groot, what do you say about QMV?
Well, I think the Minister has said most of what I would like to say. First of all, QMV would imply that we have to change the treaties. Changing the treaties means you have to ratify this in 27 parliaments and the European Parliament. I think this is far too complex and difficult, because membership is not only about membership and entering the EU and the internal market. Membership of more members also changes the institutional balance within the EU. That has to do with quite a lot more than just entering the internal market. So I think with this new methodology, we have now left this issue behind us. And I agree with the Czech Minister for Foreign Affairs that we should now focus much more on a new methodology, once again, which is there to be able to speed up the enlargement process, because it has been too slow over the past couple of years. And we want to put all our energy in getting this done as quickly as possible. That requires lots of work in the region. It requires lots of work on the side of member states and the Commission. So let's focus on that.
Thank you so much. Ms. Bregu, I want to ask you about what your organization and is doing, and what you think the common regional market might do to halt the really dramatic demographic decline that we see in the region. The trends are really quite alarming. I had an interview with the president of North Macedonia last week about the fact that they expect to see from the census that could have lost up to a quarter of their population, if not 1/5, in the last 3 decades. And the trends are similar all across the region. Are you coming up with sort of targeted strategies about that as well?
Valerie, I've been looking into the data, and I keep receiving a lot of info and questions about that. That this is one of the issues that your friend and colleague Tim Judah was following very closely. And definitely we felt this month, since we received a lot of questions as well and figures about the situation of migrants in the region, so the brain drain, that maybe we need to bring together all the data. And this is something that we may start immediately with, to bring in one single, let's say, baseline all the figures that come from the region, not only in terms of the people, how many are leaving, but in specific target groups. So trying to make the data on different categories, on women, on how many of them are people who had the diploma, which professions, and so on, in order to have first a good reading and an accurate one from what's happening in the region. On the other hand, you have a lot of other organizations as well and institutions in the region who has this demographic I would say pillar part of their own and daily work. So we'll try to read the data in order to get more feelings in and understandings on how it will influence the economies of the region.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bregu. We are coming to a close, and I would like to maybe end with a bang. But before I do that, and I'm sorry that means Ambassador SCHÜTZ, it's going to be your bang. But before I do that, I will try to soften the blow with a comment that came from Andrei de Munter of the European Parliament, who thanks you for daring to say, as one of the very few, that it would be difficult to imagine EU member states who would not recognize each other. Instead of, and I'm quoting him, repeating the evasive and deliberately spinned full normalization of relations rhetoric. He says, also, without genuine reconciliation, nothing will be sustainable in the region. Now we have an unprecedented situation in Serbia, which could really allow for a final legally binding deal that could or could not include recognition, because of the government that's now being formed and the overwhelming majority that President Vučić's Serbian Progressive Party won in the parliament. And I'm wondering how your cow Berlin sees the overwhelming majority in power now in Serbia, whether you are expecting now from them to finally deliver, considering the mandate that the people have given. Yeah. So that's the big bang. I mean, since we're in the Belgrade Security Forum, I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't ask about that. Thank you. Oh, I think your microphone is muted, maybe. Or I just don't hear you.
Anyone hear me?
Now I can hear you. It's all good.
Okay. Because no, of course we have been following developments in Serbia very closely, and now more than 4 months after the elections, we're looking forward to having a new government in Serbia, and of course it's a government with an overwhelming parliamentary majority behind it. So we definitely expect the Serbian government to take decisive action and demonstrate that it is serious about a swift progress in the EU accession process. We have studied the latest EU report on Serbia, which gives credit to the progress already achieved, but at the same time has also singled out a number of issues where important areas like judiciary, media freedom, fight against corruption, issues which lie at the heart of the EU as a community of values. And so there, the Commission report has stated that there is limited progress so far. So we certainly think that the new Serbian government will have to work along these lines. The Commission report gives very good guidelines, clear guidelines, where more effort still is needed, reviving the justice reform, improve the situation of freedom of the media, achieve a solid track record also in fighting corruption and organized crime. I mean, these are issues where we think that the Serbian government will have a chance now to take decisive action. And of course, I do not want to forget Chapter 35, which is of concern also for the entire region. And that, of course, is the normalization dialogue with Kosovo, where we hope that progress can be achieved and that eventually there will be a comprehensive agreement.
Thank you very much, Ambassador SCHÜTZ, and thank you everybody for joining in. We've gone a few minutes over, so I don't want to take any more of our speakers' very precious time. I think we've had a quite interesting discussion. We are certainly living in interesting times, and given all that's happened in the last year since we convened, I really look forward to the debate next year. And before then, I hope to see many of you soon in person and virtually. Thank you all again. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to the audience. And thank you again to the forum for asking me to moderate this very interesting panel. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you for watching the online panel of the 10th Belgrade Security Forum. We will be back soon.